Then we'll move on. We'll introduce tonight's speaker, Livermore and Knight. No, actually, it's Bob Toal. We're talking about Livermore and Knight, the advertising cards and things, in a very, very interesting area. Some of us know Bob from the York show.
Yeah.
At a Stanford for many years, and getting to know him, I thought, this guy's a wealth of information. The stuff he knows, and listening to talk to other collectors, just a great knowledge of stamp materials. And I kind of failed in my background as far as introducing you tonight. So maybe when you start, just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got collecting what you collect, and maybe how you got to be a dealer. I think it's always nice for us to know about people and where they come from. And you might just find that there's somebody who collects your area, and you'll have a new collecting partner. So with no further ado, Bob, I'll turn that over to you. Do you want questions during the session, or do you want them to be at the end?
Either way, it doesn't matter to me.
So someone just raise their hand if they have a question.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we had a good practice before. You just want to hit that green button, and you're all set to go.
Is it gone? Okay, yeah, it shows.
Ready to go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, first off, yeah, I got involved in being a dealer many years ago because I wanted money to be able to buy for my collection. So I started out by just consigning covers to local dealers in Knoxville, Tennessee, and little by little, I started accumulating a war chest, and I used that money, half of it for my collection and half for my stock. So I'm not a high-powered dealer, but I do have a variety of things. And then really, I think what all dealers do is I sell from my collection sometimes. So that's number one. Number two is what I collect is I actually focus on postcard postal history. That's probably number one. Then number two is I specialize in the postal history of the U.S. Number 220, the red no triangles George Washington stamp of the small banknote. And then lastly, I have a collection, cover collection of the 1 cent banknote, a large banknote. So there we have it. So first off, Livermore and Knight, I got involved with this because I went to I think it was a Chicago show sometime in the 90s, 92, I forget when it was, but I brought a bunch of EFOs with me. I was gonna sell out my EFOs to Sam Houston and use the money to try to focus on postcard postal history. So there was a dealer there who was just packed with customers rifling through all sorts of covers, and several of the boxes were Livermore Knights, and I found them very attractive. They were very clean. They were used in the 1890s, which is the period I collect. So I took a look at them. Well, right off the bat, I realized that they weren't cheap. So I thought, okay, I'll buy a couple from him, and then I'll just focus on others later. So long story short, when I went to the New York show, I actually saw a dealer there who had bought a collection, and over the next 2 years, I bought a lot of material from him. And the other material I've gotten from postcard shows, usually half from stamp shows, half from postcard shows. So anyway, Livermore and Knight, Providence, Rhode Island, they were a printing company, and they sold printing and advertising advice, and part of their advertising advice was these novelty cards. And here's an example of one of their ad cards, the January 1st, 1893 first day of the Columbian stamp. And apparently the Columbian stamp was not sold on the first day, which was Sunday, except in New York and Boston. So this is Providence, Rhode Island. So how he got this done on January 1st was probably a favor cancel, or maybe it was done January 2nd and backdated, who knows? But it's quite attractive, and it's the only one that I know. All right, no, it's not going. Okay. So anyway, print metal rate is 1 cent per 2 ounces. So if you're a postal history collector and you like to collect usages and rates and routes to try to help figure them out, you're going to be disappointed with Livermore Knight. Basically, most of them are 1 cent per 2 ounce. They do have a lot of variety of stamps and even indicia usages, and they usually range from the 1890 issue up and through the Washington Franklin issue. Are you seeing the top of the screen or okay, you are. Anyway, it was a very large business. They had a 40,000 square foot building in Rhode Island, and they did all sorts of printing. Here's a map from 1925 that they kept and shows a point diagram of all the companies that they sold advertising services to and did things for. So each pin represents one or more contracts. And you can see how they're clustered up here in Massachusetts and the Northeast. They're very scant here in the breadbasket area of the country. So as a collector of Livermore Knight, if someone wanted one from Georgia, you can see that, well, geez, there's not a whole lot out there. So Livermore Knight started, Frank Livermore was an engraver. Richard Knight was a lithographer. And Knight began printing billheads and business cards in 1875, formed a partnership with Livermore, and they incorporated in 1892. They were located at 42 Pine Street in Rhode Island until they were flooded out in 1954, in which case they moved to Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Frank Livermore was the president until 1919, and he died. Then Richard Knight became president until 1922. Howard Knight, his brother, became president. And then Howard Knight, his son, became president. Richard Brayton Knight was owner of the company from 52 until 71, when it actually went out of business from printing, but it became a stock holding company and was dissolved in 85. So it has a long, long history. An interesting aspect is that they had branch offices in New York, London, and Boston. And one of those branch offices became a separate entity after Livermore Knight dissolved, and they were called Livermore Knight Labels. So they were in the United Kingdom, and they had a business from 98 to 03. In 1925, they did a 50-year anniversary book, and a lot of information came from there. And they were the first company to really get involved in direct mail for customers. Prior to this, most of the advertising was done by patent medicine companies and those kinds of people who had spectacular things, but it was for themselves, whereas Livermore Knight started doing it for other people. Here's an example of a Livermore Knight card. You can see it's advertising the Smith Premier No. 2 typewriter. On the back of the card, you have a picture of a secretary on the left, and then of course it's canceled, and it was mailed to Penn Iron Works in Lancaster, PA. And I think the Penn Iron Works went out of business around 1908. So this is circa 1905 or so. If you pull this platen out, it has, it says, "Dear sir, remove the platen roll and read this letter." And there's a letter attached. And the letter is right there. And if you open up the letter, it talks about trying to sell, talks about the qualities of the typewriter. So what they would do is they would go to the Smith Premium Typewriter Company and say, "Here's an idea we have for you. We can make these up at X amount per 100 or per 1,000. And then you can mail them out at a penny a piece." Well, Smith Brothers, it turns out I searched them on the internet, and they used to make shotguns, and then they started making typewriters in 1886. And what's really interesting is this particular typewriter has uppercase keys and lowercase keys, and it's called an understroke typewriter or a blind typewriter. In other words, when you typed a letter, you did not see the line show on the platen roll. It was not visible. So in order to see it, you had to pull the platen roll up and look at it. And this typewriter was actually starting to be phased out in 1905. So they were not competitive because the front stroke typewriter came out in 1896. So that's just a little sideline as to about this. But if you look at the slide, just like a Smith Premium. So the direct mail novelty started around 1891 to 1918. So this was a sideline in their business and probably done by Richard Dexter Knight, because he was a lithographer. And so this is probably his handiwork. The way they work is that there is a group of cards in the early days and later that are not numbered. The earliest card that I found is 1891. The earliest numbered card, which is number 13, was mailed 1892, and that's this one down here. This is an 1891 one. And you can actually see the string on this side. So you pull this string and it opens up and the message is on inside. Their last numbered card was number 1154 in 1918, which was a trifold, and it was advertising some product. They do have a card number 1218 that is not a mailed item. So the bottom line is, looking at this, you're going to say, wow, there's going to be 1,000 Livermore Night cards out there. And who knows? I don't think so. There's probably more like 400. Not all Livermore Night cards are numbered. Some are, and not all are mailable. So here's a Petite Calendar. There's a greeting card that you can give someone and fold the bill and see in the oval window. And they were probably the first ones to come up with that idea. Some of their cards has no numbers on them. Most cards are numbered, like I said, 13 to 1154. And it's uncertain if all the numbers were taken. The dates are not sequential for the numbers. So you can have a number that's early and one that's a little longer, and they could be vice versa relative to usage. So the sequence of their numbering is difficult to figure out. They were stock cards, meaning the same card could be had with different ads. So you could find a card with a typewriter ad that was from the Smith Premium Company in New York or Pennsylvania, or you might find one where there's a company somewhere else. Just depends. So people shop for the ads. Most of the cards have a patent applied for versus a copyright on them. And here you can see the cards. They're usually numbered, and they will have this statement: copyright Livermore Night, Providence, Rhode Island. So they all have a name tag, and that's what gives them a provenance. People like to look for that. In the backs of their cards, they usually had a drawing around the stamp box that was in theme with what was the front of the card. And you can see that the postal regulations around 1904 changed such that you couldn't have a lot of confusing diagrams around the stamp. So in 1903, this is what that card looked like, which was a George Washington birthday card. And then here's what the follow-up card looked like with a different number. They moved it to the left. So that was a result of postal laws and regulations. Auction catalogs, when they offer these things, they really don't know what they have. They don't tell you that they're Livermore Night, and they usually don't tell you what numbers they are. Here's one from Schuler Rumsey. It says 4 different trifold clasp cards, estimate 150, 200 bucks. And, I call up and they go, hey, what are is it Livermore Night, and what are the numbers? And they don't know what I'm talking about. So it makes it difficult. Collectors who collect Livermore Night, there is a loyal following. It's not big, but they are out there, and there is a supply and demand thing. Some people go for the entire field. The problem is, what's completion? I like pre-1898 cards. They're called Pioneer cards, and they're quite attractive. And so I tend to gravitate toward those, except now I'm trying to do a survey of all the ones that were printed. Many topical collectors go for these because they're the theme on the card, front and to back, and also the product in the ad text: bicycles, telephones, Columbian World's Fair, and so forth. And then also state collectors, last but not least, based it on a specific advertiser of that state. They did a lot of current news headlines. Just to give you an example, here's a card from Trenton, New Jersey, and it talks about the war, and it's a 1914 card, and the card opens up and it shows they're talking about the war, and they're using the theme of the war to this company to sell their young men's clothing. The style of the cards. Fundamentally, they come in different styles. There's a regular size, there's letter cards, bind trifolds, die cuts, long and oversized cards. Then there's mechanicals, which are quite intricate sometimes, and I'm sure were expensive back then. Then there's single cards, trade cards, and lookalikes. So I'm going to go through this, just showing you examples of these categories. Here's a bunch of regular size cards. Now, what these things had was they had a pouch on the back of the card, and you can see how they had their folded advertising thing. And this particular one has another folding advertising, and it has a little pull tag. So you pull that out. So if you got this in the mail, rather than throw it away, usually you opened it up and said, what does it say? Here's one of Billy Captain Kidd, and it's a trifold. And on the back, it has a picture of a keg with cannonballs on it. And you open this thing up, and since it's a trifold, you open it up, the printing is on the inside of the trifold. These are not trifolds, they're single cards, and they have little advertising sheets. This particular one does also, it is missing, but it fits inside the mailbox. Here's an example of one opened up. So here's a card mailed with 1 cent. Here's a donkey with a flap on his back, and that thing opens up, and this advertising sheet comes out, and it's advertising Young's hats from the hub in the Gluck building. Well, I Googled that, and it turns out that the Gluck building was in Niagara Falls, and this is the Gluck building. And what I found out for this particular one was this is the 4th hotel on this site that ended up burning down. There was a hotel there in 1863 that burned down. Then one in 1865 burned down, 92, and then later for the last one. So they have a lot of things to offer people in terms of you have to look inside the envelope for the message. Now here's the thing: I have seen these cards with a fake message in them, and you never want to buy one without the message, because then you don't have the whole story. Can people see this whole slide? Good. I can't see part of it. It has an example of a Livermore night ad telling you how much it costs to produce these cards. And they were fairly inexpensive by the hundreds and by the thousands. So it's fun to get those kind of ads. Here's a letter style card, and these things say tear along the edges. They all, and this is a very early use of this style card. These letter style cards didn't come out until for the U.S. until 1886 for the Grant letter sheet, but they're quite interesting. So basically, if you tear this along this line, you open up the card, and inside they'll have the advertisement, and you can see that they have printed stamp collars on different kinds. And these two cards here have the same number. They are numbered the exact same, and they have different ads, and they have different appearances for some reason. Here's a very interesting card, I thought, and this one shows how they used a card. They used news headlines to market things for their customers. So the customer here is Needham Pianos. So he goes up to Livermore Night and says, hey, I want to sell some pianos. Can you cook me up a mailer to mail out? And they go, I got a great idea. Here's one. This guy Rankin in Germany just last November discovered X-rays. I'm going to make this an X-ray card, and we're going to say that it says, by means of the cathode rays, we are enabled to examine the wonderful organisms of the human system, but we can we are not enabled to discover the vital force which supplies it with its motive power. Could the cathode rays be applied to the Needham piano and organ? Would it be enabled to discover the most wonderful organism and be surprised? So the bottom line is they tied this to what was going on currently. And this is a cathode ray tube. And actually, these are not cathode rays coming out. These are X-rays. But just to give you background, Conrad Rankin in Germany was using a Crookes tube to do research. And what they would do, this was every scientist of known had these Crookes tubes, and they were firing them up with high voltage electricity, and they were watching these little electron particles fly out and bounce into things. It's just that they didn't know they were electrons. They didn't know what they were. So they found out that they were magnetic and all this kind of stuff. And Rankin was doing research with these things, and what he decided to do was cover his entirely with cardboard, and he left one area open because he wanted to see if these rays exited the tube. And they found out that they did, but they only went about half an inch. Well, he was doing this one night, and he had a luminescent screen on a table 6 feet away. So he fires his tube up to get a discharge, and what happens, that screen starts to light up. And he goes, "What's that screen lighting up for?" And he does it again, and it lights up again. He does it a third time, sticks his hand in front of the screen, and he sees his bones. And he goes, "Holy cow, there's something new coming out here." So the first thing he did was he got paranoid. He thought, holy, if I'm finding this thing by accident, surely somebody else is finding it. I better figure out what this is, write up a paper, and get it published. So this is an X-ray, the first X-ray ever taken of his wife Anna's hand. And this is Conrad Rankin. And this is a Englishman, Crookes, who invented the tube long ago. So Rankin wrote a paper and submitted it on December 28th, 1895. And he discovered the phenomenon November 8th, 1895. So really what was happening was some of these tubes were able to make X-rays as well as discharge all these. Actually, the cathode rays were actually being discharged in all the tubes, but some of the tubes, the cathode rays would interact with metal and give their energy up as X-rays. And he found it by accident, but he capitalized on it. Well, what happened? It was front page news in the US, January 1896. And so this guy, Eddie McCarthy, is ice skating on the river, January 9th, and he falls and breaks his wrist. And his doctor, who takes care of him, has a brother who works at Dartmouth in the physics lab. And he goes, "Hey, do you have any of those tubes? Can we try them out to see if we can take an X-ray?" And the guy says, "Sure, let me see how many tubes I've got and whether they make X-rays." Well, he tested all 12 tubes and only one made X-rays. And here's the one right there. And after a 12-minute exposure, he got a picture. So that was the first medical X-ray in America. So this was capitalized upon by Livermore and Knight in May. So that's how they worked. Another thing, American Electrical Works contracted to have this card made in 1897. It was a Christmas card, and the Electrical Works sold, wire and to large companies. So they were a wholesaler to large companies, and they made this card. And then here it's a fold. You tear it off down the bottom, open it up, and it has this sled on it, three-dimensional sled. It's typed on there Edison and Tesla. And it folds up, and there's a Christmas tree with gifts and so forth. And then there's the ad. And then on the other side, there's a little ditty about the Christmas tree and buying presents for people. So because their customer was American Electrical Works, they specifically dreamed up this ad idea using people of the time, Tesla and Edison. And here they are. There was a war of the currents going on in the 1890s between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. Tesla worked with George Westinghouse on AC currents, and Edison was pushing DC infrastructure. So he had all his money and vision tied up in DC, and Tesla thought, no, you can't, with DC, you can't transmit it long distances. So in the bottom line is when Niagara Falls did their power plant project in 1893, Tesla's two-phase AC won out, and Edison went on with other things. They made bifold cards with printed ads, and you can see the different examples here. And this one talks about their circular advertising thing. And here's pre-cancels from Bureau pre-cancel from Rhode Island. A lot of these cards will have pre-cancels on them. They're kind of interesting. They made trifold cards of different types, and these are opened up. And you can see that they use the stamp at the junction of the fold to keep the item closed, and on the inside they'll have a message. And again, it may be a message, and I can't read this particular where it was sent to. Where was it? Ohio. So this could have been. This could have an Ohio message on it, or you might find the same one with a Pennsylvania message. Here's one advertising Gorham Silver. And again, it's a 1 cent printer matter rate, and you can see that there's a mute killer. Here's a trifold there. Here's one pushing Marconi. So they talk about a wireless message for you. And if you open up the card, in other words, when the card's closed, you see a telegraph operator on a ship who's using the wireless telegraphy to transmit a message. And when you open the card up, there it is, and there's the open card. It's cut out, and then if you open it up, it talks about a ship cruise, and they want people to buy tickets to go on this ship. So anyway, it factors in Marconi. Now, of course, Marconi got the Nobel Prize for wireless telegraphy. He shared it with another person, but various researchers were investigating radio waves for years. Usually it started around 1880s. And they discovered that radio waves were part of the electromagnetic or light spectrum, just long wavelengths. So Marconi really worked out the details of it, and he got a patent in England in 1896 for it. And in 1899, he installed equipment on the St. Paul, which was a U.S. vessel, and was able to use wireless telegraphy to send messages to shore. In December 1902, he did a transmission across the Atlantic. So there was a lot going on. We had X-rays discovered, and then we had have Marconi going on, and we had the car. We had a lot of things going on. Very, very tumultuous times and progressive times. They made die cuts. This one opens up. It shows the front and back, but it opens up, and again, it has the Livermore Night label on it, and it has the number. And it's canceled with a mute cancel, and inside it has the message. Here's a very large one, which talks about Georgia peaches, Rumpf and Moore, Marshallville, Georgia, and they made. Actually, they were the ones who came up with the variety of peach that made Georgia famous, and so. The person using this was from Rhode Island, and he was in the fruit business, and he wanted to buy cartons and cartons of these and sell them to his customers. So he mailed this large advertising piece specifically made for him by Livermore Night. And here's the piece on the back. If you open it up, you can see the peaches in there. And Rumpf and Moore, this is Samuel Rumpf, and this is his wife, Clara Alberta Moore. Actually, her father was the Moore of Rumpf and Moore of the varieties. So you can learn a lot about these things, but it's amazing how much effort they put into a 1 cent item. And here you open it up, and it talks about peaches, peaches, peaches. Philip Eddy's the guy from Rhode Island, and he's telling, hey, I'm getting me a bunch of these great peaches from Georgia. You better show up because they're not going to last long. Trifolds exist with die-cut flaps. This is an example of a baseball theme, and you can see the trifold edges here, which fit into a slot in the card to keep it closed. And of course, it opens up, and here's what this thing is trying to sell. It's trying to sell these mattresses, and it says, "You'll be safe if you handle these two sales getters." So they were trying to tie in the word safe with selling these to wholesale to vendors who were selling these to their customers. So this is how they marketed it. And in this particular one, they included a postcard for return mail. So again, they would probably have anywhere from 500 to 1,000 of these made, maybe even more, you never know. This one's tough. It's a hard one to get. I think this is number 800, but it's a very tough one. Then they made partial die cuts of all sorts. Here is the back and the front. Again, they would have the picture on the back that related to the front. And here's on the level, and their kids are doing a seesaw with a level, and they talked about, you know, selling their product, and we're on the level and so forth. So, but again, these things can be used for different companies. So you see, it's always pays to open it up and read it and look inside. Long, oversized cards. They had several of them. A few dealt with the Spanish-American War. So this was right after the war. They have on the front the 1 cent green, 1898 issue, and then of course this is the back, and you can see it has peace on a cannon shell. And they talk about the new acquisitions of land: Manila, Hawaii, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Ladrones. Well, it turns out Ladrones are the Marianas. So, and they talk about, let the eagle scream, the war is over, victory is ours, peace has come. And how about buying dressing, stain inks, and methods? So get the customer's attention with a attractive direct mail piece, start off by reading what's going on, and then give them your punchline for the product. So they were using new techniques, and they were experimenting with new techniques, and I think it worked for them. Here's another one, Spanish-American War thing, and I think this thing is selling plumbing supplies. But again, it has a map of Cuba on the back with all these words on it. And I remember when the Gulf War came out, how I didn't know anything about the Middle East, and we all went out and bought maps to try to figure out what the Middle East is. So I'm sure nobody in Rhode Island knew anything about Cuba either. Well, this one was mailed to Maine. But again, it's a tear this off on the side card. And this particular one actually was not opened. So I think whoever got this decided this is a good piece to keep. I had to open it up and peek inside to find out what it was for. The gold rush. Gold. So the Klondike gold rush was going on 1896 to 1899. They used that to try to get the customer's attention, get them to open up the mail piece and not throw it away. And then whatever's on the inside, and I forget on this, maybe it was heaters or something along those lines, but something very mundane. But the coloring and the topic gets your foot in the door. And these ideas did not come from the customer. They came from Livermore Knight Company, probably Richard Knight himself. They wrote the advertising and suggested it. Some customers didn't want it. They had their own figured out, but most took the advice of Livermore Knight. Here's another one with Patriotic Uncle Sam's, and this particular one comes in two varieties. You can see that the cigar is in a different location, but the backs look the same. They have an eagle with a frame where the stamp goes. And so this was pre-1904, because after 1904, they had to draw the picture on the left side and leave the stamp box unadulterated. Long and oversized cards. Why do you need a telephone? So around 1910, only 8% of Americans owned a telephone. So telephone companies who had telephones, services they wanted to sell, or telephone companies that made telephones wanted their product purchased. And so their theme was accidents will happen. Minutes, yes, seconds may save life, property, or money. A very, very standard message. And of course, they were backing that up by saying, hey, this is what happens. It can go long distances. telephone in case of illness. They showed, another one shows a nurse, and their thing was, the doctor's not there, but the nurse is. So the nurse can call the doctor and say, hey, doc, the patient's doing this, what should we do? So it's just a way to try to convince the customer that maybe it's worth that investment to buy a telephone. Here's a few mechanicals. Some of them are quite simple. This particular one from 1890, and it's not numbered, has just a flap, and it has a string. So you pull it, open it up, and you can read the ad on the inside. And I think this particular one talks about the World's Fair. Here's one which has a hole cut to hang, and it has a piece of sandpaper cut very cleanly as a round sphere, and it spins. So it's the grinding wheel for this X. And you flip it around and you can read the ad that's on there. This particular one, this is a spindle, and this water wheel will spin. So it gets it's a lot of mechanical doodah to get the owner's attention. Now, this has nothing to do with postal history. It doesn't have rates and routes. It's not going via Brindisi or all that kind of stuff, but it is Americana in this day and age, this particular era. Here's a very intricate one. And it was sold, it was advertising metal lockers by the Pendar company. But what it was here's the card closed. And it has a flap, the hasp, that flips up. And when you flip this thing down, it looks like this, and you take this lock and actually slide it through a slit in there, and the lock has a notch. And inside this lock, there's a notch, and this thing goes in there and actually shuts. And it has a grommet there to allow it to swivel. So they didn't buy 100 of these at 3 cents a piece. I don't know what they paid for them, but they weren't cheap. And those that have survived are not cheap either. But here's the Pendar Metal Company. I looked at them on eBay, and eBay has used Pendar lockers for sale. Well, it turns out that the company Pendar, who was selling these, was specialized in this mesh screening. So they actually made lockers in order to use their mesh screening, because that was their primary product that they pushed. Now here's the drawing on the back of the card, which shows money bags and a strong box to re-emphasize the lock that's on the front. So again, a very nice piece to advertise your product. And of course, you're not going to advertise oatmeal with a product like this. You're going to have a different one. Here's one again, news headlines. And when I first got this card, I thought, who's Huerta? I didn't even know who he is. Down with Huerta, circa 1914 card. Again, it has, you open the card up, it's a trifold, simple trifold, boring ad, foodstuffs and so forth. But then it has a caricature of Huerta, a swivel, and an American flag. So you put the American flag up, Huerta is down. You push the flag down, Huerta is up. So when you mail this, the flag is down. When you get the card and you open the flap and you do it, down with Huerta, that happens. And there it is there. And of course, it was mailed in 1914 with a 1 cent Washington stamp. So Huerta was a military officer and president of Mexico by coup. So apparently he was in office from February 1913 through July 1914. And when he did the coup, it was backed by Germany, and the current president, Taft, looked the other way and let him do it. President Wilson came in and didn't recognize Huerta, and he allowed arms to be sold to rebels who were opposing Huerta. So it got to the point where the rebels got power, and Huerta fled to Spain. Later, there was an attempt to regain power with German aid, but he was arrested by the U.S. and he died in custody in 1916. So a simple advertising card that looks a little comical, and maybe you wonder, what is it, could play a role in some sort of theme if you had an exhibit or something, or you collected this kind of material. So they're out there. And sometimes dealers may not recognize this if they don't really look at it closely. Then Livermore Knight made single cards with blank backs. And they were separate cards, and they were usually some add-ons. So there's a three-dimensional sign here. There's a door that opens, and these are three-dimensional hands glued on the card. But on the back of these cards, they're blank, and they say down the bottom, copyright 1909, Livermore Knight, Providence, Rhode Island. This is number 777. And they're all different numbered. So I don't know. My guess is that these were handed out by companies as Christmas acknowledgments to their employees, and they sometimes had writing on them, and then most of the times printing. Maybe they were mailed in an envelope. I've not found one of these mailed yet on the back. They're probably out there, but I don't think they were meant for that. I think they were meant just for niceties by the business to give out to their employees or to acknowledge the season. Typical of this era, you're going to have stereotypes of all types of people, and they're going to be played up in the advertising theme itself. Filipino, you can see the Chinese, Sing, and he's got something up his sleeve, and you pull it out, and he's got a message there. And on the back, they have the typical, laundry theme, which is stereotypical of that. Then we have a farmer. Now this card is huge, is a very large card. And the farmer's looking over his field. And in the back, on the left-hand side, it shows the farmer looking over the field here, except the field is different. Rather than corn and potatoes, it's a young lady. Here's one which actually they're talking to each other, and she says, "Have you seen my chicken?" And he goes, I haven't seen no stray rooster. And of course, he's got feathers coming out of his pocket, and you pull the feathers out, and the feathers are glued to this piece of paper here, and you open it up, and this particular one is advertising cigars. So it's a kind of a gentle stereotype thing, but they happen. They didn't do a lot of stereotypes like this, but they're out there. This particular card is actually not that rare. There are a lot of them out there, and there's a lot of different lumber companies use these. A lot of different companies preferred to use this type of stuff. Who knows why? Maybe they thought it was funny, but they use it. But they all have feathers, and they're different types of feathers that were used on those things. Again, Livermore Knight would print the card, then print the glue on here, glue it on, print the insert, glue the feathers to the insert, and then insert it, put them in a box, and they would mail the customer how many they had. Now, in some cases, they would actually mail the stuff for the customers and address it. They had prices on their books to do that. So they were a full-service advertising agency. Here's one of the typical dead-end kid. This is the Yellow Kid, which was a character made by Alcott, but was not copyrighted. So other people stole the image, including Livermore Knight. And they don't have this card copyrighted because they can't. This is done by somebody else. But anyway, he's carrying a backpack. He's got a little slot in there, and then this message thing is folded up inside and has a printed picture. And it's the 5th annual tournament for the ACC and the LAW, the American Cycle Club and the Long Wheelmen's Association or something. In other words, they were bicycle clubs and bicycle races. And so they talked about the meet. This was 1897. Apparently bicycling was a craze, and by 1905 or 1906, it kind of died out because car racing became the replacement. So, but this was during the heyday of bicycling and bicycle racing, and it's quite a nice card. This is one of the most expensive cards, and this particular one has a damaged stamp, but I've only seen 2 cards of this out there, and I only had access to buy this one. When Livermore Knight started out in 1883, Livermore worked for Farmer and Livermore as an engraver. And so he did lots of engravings, and some of his early trade cards were engraved trade cards. And he did engravings while he was working as a member of Livermore Knight, usually book engravings for pictures of famous people and so forth. So here's a trade card, 1884, which was 1 year after they got together as a team. And this one is a calendar card. Apparently, there is some indication that Livermore Knight got a calendar contract in 1901 with an insurance agency to make them interesting calendars of historical interest. And the reading says that they had 2 boxcar loads of calendars in a railroad that they shipped to their customer for 1902. So the work that they did was in volume, and it helped pay the bills. There are some lookalikes out there. This was a very common one. It usually talks about the Boer War, and there's a theme, there's a song in here, a very patriotic song. This one has German news, and these are German cards. And this one I think is a Dutch card, and this one is German card. And again, you can see it has the message in there. If you had a chance to buy this without the message, it should be cheap. Make sure they drop the price. Henderson Litho came out. Now, the reason why it's important to know this is because Livermore Knight cards cost about 5 to 10 times more than Henderson Litho cards. That could change, but right now they're more sought after. Some dealers sell these as Livermore Knights because they look like them, but they don't have the Livermore Knight indicio down the bottom. This one has copyright E. Nash, who was the artist, and Circle H. And they numbered their cards too, 182. Circle H is synonymous with Henderson Litho. And they also they were a stationery company, and they have envelopes out there with advertising on it and so forth. But they're kind of interesting cards. And these were sold to businesses for their direct mail advertising. So you open this card up, it's a bifold or a trifold, it'll have an ad in it. What I found out about Henderson Litho cards is that the vast majority are blank. They're unused. There's remainders that were out there. So maybe they didn't sell well, I don't know. But anyway, they're circa 1904. But they're quite attractive. Then the other one that's out there is Sheldon Press, and these are later, around 1910. They have postcard backs, but again, they are bifold or trifold, and they advertise products for their customers. And again, they were sent at 1 cent rate, and they have as their logo the triangle B or the box B. And here's they're just kind of interesting. And this particular one I've seen on eBay. So. Bottom line is Livermore Knight, they got together in 1983, and in 1971 they stopped real business and held on as a holding company until 1985. And I think the Knight descendant who owned the company wanted to reach the 100-year mark, and that's why he held on that long. But you can see some more cards here. Well, that's the end of that particular presentation. And let me come back.
Let's give a round of applause to Bob Toal for just a phenomenal presentation this evening. It really was just stellar. Thank you. Thank you, Bob. We'll take some questions now if we could. I mean, I know you have plenty. I know I do, but I'll pass it to everybody online. Questions for Bob, please.
You know, one thing I should say is there's probably 4 or 5 designs that are pure English. They have English-themed cards, and they have in there patented in London. So they had an office in London and Boston and New York as to get business. So people would come in not only for these advertising cards, but for general business in general. You know, printing this, printing that, doing whatever they can do.
So Bob, so is there, I'll list the first question. So there's a checklist of, I guess, nowadays of kind of all the known types of varieties. I know you said they're numbered. I know they may not be every number used and they may not be sequential, all of that, but there's a pretty good inventory of the styles and types and designs that are out there by number. Is that true or no?
I'm making that list.
That's what I thought you were doing. I just wanted for the group to make sure everybody's aware, because there really isn't anything formally published, but you, who've been leading this for so long, no doubt will have a list shortly. Is
there was a dealer, the dealer at New York. I bought many of his cards, but I just didn't want to buy all of them. So I paid him extra money to have his son make JPEGs of all the cards.
Oh, that's great. Great. So you have all the images and you can catalog and categorize them, and you will do that.
Yeah.
I have a second question, Bob, as a follow-up, because I know you said that clearly they were really expert at marketing and kind of leveraging what was going on at the day. So I guess the challenge is, and I know you showed a card of a specific type for a specific company, like the safe with the baseball, and they were looking to, push their, the bed and the mattress and all that. So you would find a similar card, and you have similar cards that are for a completely different company, but the same style. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Now there are about 4 cards that are numerous with many different vendors for them. The cheaper cards, the ones with the donkey, the farmer, the lady with the umbrella. Those cards are very frequent, but they're very nice cards. But the
donkey is the only one I have, so I was happy you showed that, Bob, because that's the only one that I have of Livermore.
What does the ad say? Do you know?
I'll have to pull it out afterwards and tell you. I think it's different when I saw yours.
Yeah, mine was
the one that I have.
Yeah, so. but mine had one of mine has a printed picture on it, which is kind of neat.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. So we'll have to share after this then.
I've seen one of those donkey cards on eBay with the ad about Spalding selling baseball material. Yeah.
Okay.
They're interesting.
So they're out there. Thank you. Any other questions, please, for Bob?
Bob, question on the company itself. Are there archives anywhere, business records, or did they just find their way to the dump?
There is a graves, what's it called? Find a grave on eBay or on the internet.
Yeah.
And Richard Knight has a photo there of his tombstone, and so does his son and grandson. The person who put it on there is a Knight. And I emailed him several times to say, hey, what about an archive? Does anybody know anything about this? Is there anybody interested in answering questions? And he never responds. So maybe he thinks I'm a Looney Tune. Who knows? But that's all I know. I tell you one thing. They got swept away by the changing times. They were king up until 1925. And then when radio came in, they had competitors. And then when TV came in, it was it.
Hey, Bob, I have a follow-up too. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, send a copy of the link to your presentation to the same guy. He might realize you're a serious student.
Well, I told him I was trying to write a book and I wanted any tidbit I could get. And I don't think that got him interested.
Yeah. I'll give it one more try.
Yeah, I will.
Hey, Bob, on your card, like the oversized Spanish-American War, if I recall, that had the perforated at the right where you had to tear that strip off. Was this the first of its kind that they patented that process in you? Because that's very, very early to have a perforated tearaway strip on anything.
In 1882, I think, Brazil came out with a letter card that had a perforated edge on 3 sides. The U.S. came out with their letter sheet in 1886, and then England came out with theirs in 1897.
Okay.
These were the first to have single perforated edges and even tabs that were perforated. So they were innovative.
Yeah, the other thing that should be noted is these cards are thick. These have some heft. These are
Oh,
not
yeah.
lightweight,
No.
I mean, because of the pouches and what they're
Yes.
carrying and,
Yeah,
I mean, these are really quite hefty.
yeah. And it's, you just don't know where to look for them, who's got them. And some, you come across one, you go, okay, is this worth it? What's the value? But
Any question?
I had one card. I had a card that a customer looked at a show, and he was a Livermore night collector, and he needed the card, and he looked at it, and I'd found it in a box of stuff I bought, and blah blah blah. But anyway, he pulls the letter out and reads it, and he goes, "This paper doesn't look right. It doesn't look like the typical paper on these ads." And I go, "Show it to me." And I looked at it, and I go, "You're right." I said, maybe it's been faked. Who knows? And he
Right.
goes, "Well, I don't want to buy it." And I go, "I don't blame you." So anyway, sometimes people, it doesn't matter. They like it no matter what,
Mhm.
But you got
But
to,
how far are you, Bob, from your list or your pamphlet or monograph on sort of summarizing these that this group might expect to see something in press, or you're going to publish, or what's your thoughts about how to get that information out there?
I am on the starting block as we speak. And I spoke to my nephew who works for a printing company who's computer savvy. And I said, "Justin, I have all these files, which are PDFs. I need converted to JPEGs. I want to do this book. I need your help and ideas." And so I wanted to get it done.
Excellent.
My Lippmann book took me from June to November. So, I mean, hopefully this is a picture book though. So, so it's a little more involved.
Yeah, no, that's great. We'll just have to keep an eye out for it. I mean,
Yeah.
I enjoyed your first book. I thought that was a seminal, as you know,
No, thank you.
piece, and I'm looking forward to this. So
Hey,
that's great.
Well, let me make a real quick statement. Charlie
Please.
talking about a book I published on Lippmann, who actually is credited for inventing the private postcard. But here's the nifty thing about Lippmann is that there's no known picture of him. So H.R. Harmer had an auction in December of a Lippmann card. I go to it, I look at the picture, and it shows this guy with a goatee as Lippmann. And I go to the Find a Grave site, and sure enough, the guy with a goatee is Lippmann there. And I go, this guy doesn't look American, he looks European. And come to find out, it was Theo Van Gogh, Van Gogh's brother. So I emailed the guy at Find a Grave, and I said, "This is not Lippmann. Let me show you." And I gave him a brown card that showed the picture, and he pulled it down. So the point is, the other thing is there are two other pictures used for Lippmann. So anyway, bottom line is, you know this as well as I do. You can't believe anything you read on the internet.
Yeah, you got to cross-reference and double check and triple check, and then call the guy and then follow up. We got it, Bob. We know.
Yeah.
We know. It's true.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Bob. We really appreciate it. And
Good.
I'm glad to have you present and have as a member of the club and a dealer. Hopefully we'll be back into business within the next 6 months to a year with our
Hopefully.
stamp shows and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah.